For God so loved the world that he gave his only son.
The rain was relentless that Tuesday morning, the kind that blurred the edges of the world and soaked you straight through no matter how fast you ran. Rachel Bennett stood outside her apartment door, juggling a grocery bag that had begun to tear at the seams. She was already late for work. Her 4-year-old, Grace, had been sick all night. The electricity bill lay unpaid on the kitchen counter, and the landlord's warning note was still taped to the fridge. She bent to pick up a fallen apple, only to notice something strange on the doormat. An envelope. No name, no address, just her apartment number, written in a graceful, old-fashioned script. She glanced up and down the hallway. Empty. Inside her apartment, she tore it open. A single sheet of cream-colored paper slid out, smelling faintly of lavender. Rachel, do not be afraid. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Deuteronomy 31:8. You are stronger than the storm you are walking through. You matter. Keep going. Her heart pounded. She sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the handwriting. Nobody knew the depth of her struggle. Not her co-workers at the diner, not her distant relatives, certainly not strangers. It had to be a mistake. But when she turned the paper over, there was a postscript. Tomorrow you will have the chance to help someone. Don't hesitate. The next morning, Rachel was more distracted than usual. She tucked the letter into her bag before leaving for work, telling herself she was being silly. The day passed without incident, until she left the diner after her shift. Across the street, an elderly man struggled to lift his grocery bag from the sidewalk. The plastic handle snapped clean through. Without thinking, Rachel hurried over, kneeling to gather the spilled cans. The man smiled in relief. "Thank you, dear. You didn't have to." Rachel heard herself reply, "I wanted to." As she handed him the bag, her fingers brushed against something tucked under the cans, another envelope. Her breath caught. When she opened it later, the same lavender scent rose up to meet her. "Rachel, you see, even the smallest kindness matters. Keep your eyes open. The next step will bring you closer to where you're meant to be." Her skin prickled. She didn't know who was sending these letters or how they knew her name, but she couldn't deny the strange warmth blooming in her chest. Somewhere deep inside, after months of exhaustion and loneliness, something stirred. Hope. 2 days later, the rain had cleared, but Rachel's thoughts were stormy. Grace's fever had finally broken, but the medicine bill had eaten what little she had left for groceries. As she walked Grace to preschool, her phone buzzed with a reminder. Electricity bill due today. She sighed. When she returned home, another envelope waited on her doormat. Same cream paper, same lavender scent. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. "Rachel, do not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Galatians 6:9. Today, someone will need your voice. Speak for them. It was absurd, she told herself. But all day her mind replayed the words, "Someone will need your voice." That evening, at the grocery store, she saw a young cashier being berated by a customer over an expired coupon. Her hands shook. Rachel stepped forward. "Sir, you can see she's doing her best. There's no need to raise your voice." The man muttered something and left, leaving the girl wide-eyed. "Thank you. I didn't think anyone would say anything." Rachel smiled faintly. Sometimes, people just need someone to stand beside them. She didn't notice the tall man in a dark coat, 2 aisles over, watching her with quiet curiosity. The next letter arrived 3 days later. "Rachel, give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap." Luke 6:38. This week, find a way to give what you can. Even the smallest seed can grow into a tree. Rachel stared at the nearly empty jar of coins on her counter. She could barely afford to feed herself and Grace, but the thought of ignoring the letter felt wrong. That afternoon, she walked past a street musician playing violin. His case lay open, nearly empty. Rachel dropped 3/4 inside. He stopped playing, looked up and said, "Bless you." The moment she turned the corner, a voice called her name. It was Mrs. Hargrove, the elderly neighbor in 3B. "I made too much stew," she said, handing Rachel a container. "You and Grace take this." Rachel blinked. She'd given 3/4 and received dinner for 2. Somewhere deep down, she felt the unseen thread pulling her forward. The next letter was different. "Rachel, when you open your hand to others, you also open your heart to what God has for you. This Saturday, attend the fundraiser at St. Matthew's Hall. Wear something that makes you feel beautiful." Rachel almost laughed out loud. She didn't have the money for an event like that, or the wardrobe. But on Friday, a package appeared outside her door. Inside was a simple navy dress and a note. "Consider it a gift by a friend." Against her better judgment, Rachel went. The hall was filled with warm light, soft music, and tables piled high with silent auction items. She felt entirely out of place until she noticed the tall man she'd seen in the grocery store. Dark hair, tailored suit, an air of quiet command. He was speaking to a group of donors, but his eyes found hers across the room. Later, they met by the coffee table. "I don't think we've met," he said. "I'm Daniel Whitmore." Her breath caught. The name was familiar. He's the CEO of Whitmore Industries. Widowed, if the news articles were right. "Rachel Bennett," she replied, feeling oddly self-conscious. His smile was polite, but his gaze lingered. "I've seen you before." They spoke for only a few minutes, but Rachel couldn't shake the sense of familiarity in his voice. When she got home that night, another letter was waiting. "Rachel, some encounters are written before time began. Be ready, your kindness has not been unnoticed." She read it twice, her pulse quickening.
The next morning, she saw Daniel again, this time at the preschool. Grace was chasing a little boy around the playground, both laughing. "That's my son, Caleb," Daniel said, stepping up beside her. Grace smiled. "Looks like they're already friends." He glanced at her, something unspoken in his eyes. Seems so. Rachel didn't know it yet, but the letters were not only guiding her steps, they were weaving her life into his, one act of kindness at a time. And somewhere, unseen, the person sending them was smiling. The morning air at the preschool playground was crisp, carrying the scent of damp leaves. Rachel stood by the fence, watching Grace and Caleb dart between the swings and slide. Daniel leaned against the railing beside her, hands in his coat pockets. "Caleb talks about Grace all the time," he said. Rachel smiled. "Grace talks about him too. She says he's the only boy who shares his crayons without being asked." Daniel chuckled. "That sounds about right." A silence settled between them. Not awkward, but weighted with something unspoken. Rachel felt herself studying him in her peripheral vision. The faint lines around his eyes, the way his attention kept drifting toward his son, as though guarding him was second nature. Before she could stop herself, she said, "I'm sorry if this is too personal, but Grace mentioned Caleb's mom." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm so sorry," Rachel said softly. He nodded once. "It's been a journey." Then his gaze flicked to her. "What about Grace's father?" Her throat tightened. "He left before she was born." There it was, 2 lives shaped by loss, meeting in the most ordinary of places. Later that day, Rachel found another envelope on her doormat. "Rachel, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. Do not fear the places where your pain and someone else's meet. Healing often begins there. She stared at the words, feeling as though the sender had been standing beside her at the playground that morning. That evening, she decided to bake cookies for Grace's class. When she arrived with the tray the next day, Daniel was there picking up Caleb. "These are for the kids." Caleb's face lit up when he saw the cookies. Daniel smiled too, the expression softer than she'd ever seen it. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she said, realizing they'd had this exchange before, about something entirely different. The next letter was more direct. Rachel, step into rooms you feel unworthy of. You belong there more than you think. Inside the envelope was an invitation to a benefit dinner for the Whitmore Foundation. Rachel hesitated. She didn't have a gown, and she certainly didn't belong at a high-profile charity event. Still, something pushed her to go. When she arrived, Daniel was at the entrance, greeting guests. His eyes widened in a way that made her stomach flutter. "You came!" The night was a whirl of music, speeches, and champagne she couldn't pronounce. Daniel introduced her to board members, artists, and philanthropists, each time with quiet pride in his voice. When she thanked him later, he said, "You brought light into the room, Rachel. People noticed that." She didn't know how to respond. The next letter came with a different instruction. Rachel, find someone in need this week and meet it in secret. She thought about it for 2 days before slipping an envelope with cash under Mrs. Hargrove's door. The next morning, she overheard the older woman on the phone crying with relief about being able to pay her heating bill. Later that week, she bought art supplies for the preschool without leaving her name. At pickup, Daniel approached her. "The teachers are wondering who's behind the new supplies." Rachel smiled faintly. "Maybe someone who likes seeing kids create." He studied her for a moment, as though seeing through the modest answer. "You have a way of showing up exactly when people need you." The words lingered in her chest all evening. On Sunday, another letter arrived, but this time the handwriting looked slightly different, as though written in a hurry. "Rachel, you are closer than you think to the truth. Follow the trail and you will see the hand behind it." Beneath the message, there was something new, a faint signature, almost hidden in the margin. Margaret Whitmore. Rachel frowned. The name tugged at her memory. Later, while scrolling through an article about the Whitmore Foundation, she saw it. Margaret Whitmore, Daniel's late mother, known for her philanthropy and devout faith. Her heart skipped a beat. How could Daniel's mother be writing letters when she had passed away years ago? Somewhere deep down, Rachel knew this wasn't over, and that the truth, when it came, would change everything. Rachel couldn't stop staring at the name, Margaret Whitmore. The next day, she visited the public library. It felt strange, chasing the identity of a woman she had never met, yet whose words felt like they knew her soul. She searched old news articles and charity bulletins. Margaret's face appeared in photograph after photograph, smiling, elegant, a woman who seems to radiate kindness. In one old newsletter, Rachel found a scanned handwritten note from Margaret thanking donors. The handwriting was identical to the letters she had been receiving. Her fingers tightened on the paper. If Margaret had passed away 3 years ago, someone else must be sending these letters. But who? That Saturday, Daniel invited Rachel and Grace to join him and Caleb for a day at the Botanic Gardens. The kids raced ahead on the winding paths, screeching with laughter, while Rachel and Daniel trailed behind. "They're good for each other," Daniel said, watching the children. Rachel nodded. They both lost something too soon. Maybe that's why they understand each other. They found a bench near a koi pond. Daniel told her about his mother, how she'd been the heart of their family, how her faith had carried them through hard times. Rachel hesitated, then said, "She sounds like someone who would leave love behind for others to find." Daniel glanced at her sharply, but before he could respond, Grace came running back holding a flower. "This is for you, Mommy!" Rachel took it, but her thoughts stayed on the letters and the feeling that Daniel's mother was somehow at the center of all of this.
Monday afternoon, Rachel was serving coffee at the diner when a woman in her late 60s slid into a booth by the window. She had silver hair, a neat wool coat, and eyes that seemed to see more than they should. "You're Rachel," the woman said, as if she already knew. Rachel blinked. "Have we met?" "No, but I knew your grandmother, and I knew Margaret Whitmore." Rachel's breath caught. The woman leaned closer. "Margaret asked me before she passed to find people who needed encouragement. She left behind a box of letters. I've been delivering them ever since." Rachel's voice trembled. "Why me?" "She believed God would guide me to the right person. And she was right." Before Rachel could ask more, the woman slid an envelope across the table. "This one is special. Don't open it until the right moment." Then she stood and walked out into the winter sunlight. The unopened envelope weighed heavily in Rachel's purse. She thought about telling Daniel, but hesitated. What if it stirred something painful? That night, Grace woke with a nightmare. As Rachel soothed her back to sleep, she found herself staring out the window at the city lights. If Margaret's letters had been meant to guide her, then meeting Daniel wasn't an accident. But what was she supposed to do with that truth? The next day, Daniel stopped by the diner. "Caleb and I are hosting a small dinner for the foundation team on Friday. I'd like you to come." Rachel hesitated. "I don't exactly fit in with CEOs and board members." "You fit in wherever you want to be," he said simply. His words stayed with her all day. The Whitmore penthouse glowed with warm light. Rachel felt out of place at first, surrounded by polished silverware and art that looked like it belonged in a museum. But Daniel stayed near her side, introducing her with a kind of pride she didn't understand. During dessert, one of the older board members mentioned Margaret. Daniel's expression softened. She believed in planting seeds of kindness everywhere she went. Rachel's heart pounded. She glanced at the unopened envelope in her purse. Was this the moment? She didn't open it. Not yet. But as she helped Daniel carry dishes back to the kitchen, he looked at her and said, "You've brought something back into this home that's been missing for a long time." Rachel didn't need a letter to know her life was about to change, but she still had no idea how much. Grace's birthday fell on a chilly Saturday in late March. Rachel had planned a modest celebration, a homemade cake, paper hats, and a few close friends from preschool. But when Daniel heard, he insisted on hosting it at the Whitmore Gardens. Rachel protested at first, but he brushed her concerns aside. "This is about Grace. Let her have something special." The gardens looked like something from a storybook. Balloons and pastel shades, a table set under blossoming trees, and a small pony ride for the kids. Grace's laughter rang through the air, and Rachel's heart swelled. Midway through the party, Daniel pulled Rachel aside. "Seeing her happy like this, it matters to me." Rachel met his gaze.
It matters to me, too. For a moment, the world felt quiet around them, until Grace came running over with Caleb, both shouting, "Time for cake!" Rachel smiled, but inside she felt something shift. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Daniel wasn't just a kind man, he was becoming part of their lives. That night, after Grace was asleep, Rachel sat at her kitchen table with the unopened envelope the silver-haired woman had given her weeks before. Her fingers traced the flap. She told herself she'd wait for the right moment, but the truth was, she was afraid. Finally, she broke the seal. Rachel, if you are reading this, it means you've stepped into someone's life in a way that changes both of you. Do not be afraid to love again, even when it seems impossible. Love is the bridge between earth and heaven. Margaret Whitmore. Rachel read the letter twice, her pulse quickening. It wasn't just about kindness, it was about Daniel. She didn't sleep much that night, her thoughts tangled between hope and fear. 2 days later, Daniel and Rachel found themselves at a quiet cafe after dropping the kids at preschool. Over steaming mugs, Daniel said, "You've been on my mind a lot lately." Rachel's heart skipped. "In a good way?" He smiled faintly. "In a way that makes me want to know you better. All of you." Her throat tightened. "There's something I need to tell you. The letters I've been getting, they're from your mother." Daniel froze. "That's impossible. I know, but she wrote them before she passed. Someone's been delivering them to me." His expression softened from disbelief to something more vulnerable. "She always said she believed in divine appointments, moments arranged by God." Rachel felt her eyes sting. Maybe this is one of them. Just as Rachel felt the possibility of something beautiful blooming, life reminded her that the past has sharp edges. One evening, as she walked home from work, she saw a man leaning against her building. Her chest tightened. It was Paul, Grace's father. He hadn't changed much, still wearing that restless, dangerous hair. "We need to talk," he said. Rachel's instinct was to shut the door in his face, but he blocked her path. "I heard you've got someone new, rich guy. Maybe it's time you shared some of that luck with me." Fear prickled down her spine. "Stay away from us." But she knew this wasn't over. Rachel told no one about Paul, but Daniel sensed something was wrong. "Is it about the letters?" he asked one evening. She shook her head. "It's something else, someone from my past." Daniel's gaze hardened. "Who?" When she told him, his expression darkened. "You're not dealing with this alone." The next day, Daniel arranged for extra security at her building and insisted Grace spend the weekend at the Whitmore estate. That Saturday night, Rachel watched Grace and Caleb build a blanket fort in the living room while Daniel brought her a cup of tea. "You're safe here," he said quietly, and for the first time in years, she believed it. Rachel tried to keep her focus on work, but the tension never left her. Paul lingered in her thoughts like a storm cloud on the horizon.
One evening, as she left the diner, she saw him waiting across the street. This time, she didn't run. "What do you want?" she demanded. Paul smirked. "I just want a little help. You owe me." "I owe you nothing," Rachel said firmly. "You walked away before Grace was born." His voice dropped. "Maybe I'll walk right into that CEO's life, see what he's willing to pay to keep you safe." Before she could respond, a tall figure stepped out from the shadows. "Daniel." "You will stay away from her," he said, his voice like steel. Paul glanced between them, his smirk fading. "Fine, but this isn't over." He walked away, but Rachel knew it was only a pause. That night, Daniel drove Rachel and Grace back to the Whitmore estate. They sat by the fire after the children went to bed. Rachel told him everything, the letters, the silver-haired woman, the unopened one still in her drawer. Daniel listened in silence, then said softly, "My mother would have loved you." The words caught him off guard. "You don't even—" "I do. She believed in people like you, people who choose love, even when life gave them every reason not to." Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. For the first time, she realized that maybe the letters weren't just guiding her, maybe they were guiding him too. 2 days later, Rachel found the silver-haired woman waiting outside her building. "You opened the special letter?" she asked. Rachel nodded. "But I don't understand why me." The woman smiled gently. "Margaret believed God would place the right person in his son's life at the right time. She trusted me to listen when the Spirit whispered a name." Rachel's chest tightened. "She wanted me to meet Daniel?" "She wanted you to remind him that love still lives here," the woman said, placing her hand over Rachel's heart. Before Rachel could ask more, the woman pressed another envelope into her palm. "The last one. You'll know when to open it." Whitmore Foundation's annual gala was a grand affair, with glittering lights and photographers at every corner. Rachel wore the navy gown Daniel had sent her weeks before. She felt out of place at first, but Daniel stayed close, introducing her to guests with quiet pride. Midway through the evening, Rachel spotted Paul in the crowd. Her pulse spiked. "How did he get in?" she whispered. Daniel's eyes hardened. "Stay here." He crossed the room with purposeful steps, security following. Paul was escorted out before he could make a scene, but Rachel's hands still shook. Later, Daniel found her on the terrace. "You're safe now," he said, his hand warm over hers. "I promise." A week later, Rachel sat alone in her apartment, holding the final envelope from the silver-haired woman. She knew without question that tonight was the night. She broke the seal. "Rachel, if you are reading this, then you have found him, the one who will walk beside you through the storms and the sunshine. Do not let fear steal what heaven has given you. My son is a good man, but he needs your light, and you, dear girl, need his steady hand. Margaret Whitmore." Tears blurred her vision. She didn't know how Margaret could have foreseen this, but she felt her presence as surely as if she were in the room. The next day, Rachel met Daniel at the park where their children were playing. She handed him the letter. He read it slowly, his jaw tightening, then looked at her. "She really did see you coming." Rachel swallowed. "Daniel, I'm not perfect. My life is messy. I can't give you the world you're used to." He stepped closer. "I don't want the world I'm used to. I want you and Grace. I think my mother knew you needed me long before I did." Rachel felt her defenses crumble. "Then maybe we both got a gift from heaven." Spring came softly to the city. Rachel stood in the Whitmore Gardens, watching Grace and Caleb chase each other under blooming cherry trees. Daniel came up behind her, slipping his arms around her waist. "They look like they've known each other forever," he murmured. "Maybe they have," Rachel said with a smile. He turned her to face him. "Rachel Bennett, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know I want to face it with you." She leaned into him, feeling the truth of the letters, the quiet nudges that had led her here. Above them, the breeze carried the scent of blossoms and something sweeter, the feeling that love really had been sent from heaven. The Whitmore Gardens had always been quiet in the evenings, but tonight Rachel heard something unusual, the soft, haunting sound of a piano. Following the music, she found Daniel sitting at the white grand tucked beneath the glass pavilion. His fingers moved with surprising grace, coaxing a melody that felt both sad and hopeful. "I didn't know you played," Rachel said softly. Daniel looked up, a faint smile on his lips. "My mother taught me. This was her favorite piece." Rachel listened, the notes wrapping around her like a warm blanket. "It sounds like a prayer." "Maybe it is." She always said music was the language heaven understood best. That night, Rachel dreamed of Margaret's letters, only now they were carried on the wind, their words turning into melodies. One rainy afternoon, Grace came running into the living room with Caleb, holding a crumpled sheet of paper. "Mommy, we made a song." Rachel unfolded it and saw childish handwriting. "Love is when you help someone smile." Caleb added, "We want to sing it for the fundraiser." Rachel hesitated. Public performances weren't something Grace had ever done, but Daniel's eyes lit up. "Let's do it! We'll help them." For the next week, the house was filled with music. Daniel played piano, Rachel hummed harmonies, and the children sang. The night before the fundraiser, Rachel found a new letter on her nightstand. Rachel, music opens hearts in ways words cannot. Sing without fear. You never know who needs to hear it. The hall was packed for the Whitmore Foundation's annual children's benefit. Rachel was nervous, her palms damp as she guided Grace to the stage. Daniel began playing, the soft chords filling the room. Grace and Caleb sang in their sweet, imperfect voices, and Rachel joined them for the final verse. When they finished, the audience was silent for a beat, then erupted in applause. Rachel spotted the silver-haired woman at the back of the room, smiling through tears. After the show, an elderly donor approached. "That song, it reminded me of my wife. She passed last year. I'd like to make a contribution in her honor." He wrote a check large enough to fund the foundation's next project. Rachel felt chills. The letter had been right. Someone had needed to hear it. A week later, a sudden rainstorm trapped Rachel and Daniel at the garden pavilion. Instead of rushing inside, Daniel sat at the piano and began playing something new, a song he'd been writing for her. The melody was tender, laced with longing and hope. "It's called Letters from Heaven," he said when he finished. Rachel's throat tightened. "You wrote that? For me?" He corrected. "For us. For what brought us here." The rain softened, and a beam of light broke through the clouds, illuminating the piano. Rachel felt a shiver, as if Margaret herself was blessing the moment. Spring was in full bloom when Daniel asked Rachel to meet him in the gardens at dusk. When she arrived, candles lit the path to the pavilion, where the piano stood waiting. Daniel was seated there, playing Letters from Heaven. As the last note faded, he stood, holding a small box. "Rachel Bennett, you've turned my life into music again. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision. "Yes," she whispered. Somewhere in the distance, Rachel thought she heard the faint sound of a hymn carried on the breeze. The wedding was small, held in the garden under the cherry blossoms. Grace and Caleb walked down the aisle hand in hand, scattering petals. As Rachel and Daniel exchanged vows, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing them in golden light. The silver-haired woman sat in the front row, a knowing smile on her face. After the ceremony, she pressed one last envelope into Rachel's hands. "My dearest Rachel, if you are reading this, it means Heaven's letter has reached its final address. Love well, forgive quickly, and remember, music is the echo of eternity. Margaret Whitmore." Rachel tucked the letter into her bouquet. As the first notes of Letters from Heaven played, Rachel and Daniel danced under the blossoms, their children laughing nearby. And for everyone present, it felt as though heaven had leaned down to join them. The first weeks of married life felt like a quiet miracle. Rachel often woke to the sound of Daniel playing softly at the piano, the notes drifting into their bedroom like morning prayers. One afternoon, she found him composing something entirely new. "It's not for me," he explained, "it's for the children. A song they can grow up with, something they'll carry long after we're gone." Rachel sat beside him, helping to shape the lyrics. They decided it would be a song about courage, kindness, and faith, values they wanted Grace and Caleb to never forget. Over the next few days, the house filled with the sound of rehearsals. The kids sang along, sometimes off-key, sometimes giggling through verses, but always with joy. On Sunday morning, they played it for the first time in the church Margaret used to attend. The sunlight streamed through the stained glass, coloring the pews in shades of ruby and gold. When the last note faded, the congregation stood in quiet awe before breaking into applause. Later, Pastor James approached them. "That song," he said, "was more than music. It was a prayer answered." Rachel felt it too. a sense that they had been entrusted with something precious, something meant to be shared. That night, after Grace and Caleb were asleep, Daniel whispered, "You know, I think my mother would have written this song if she were still here." Rachel smiled. "Maybe she did. She just used our hands to finish it." 2 weeks later, while tidying the attic at the Whitmore estate, Rachel stumbled upon an old wooden music box. It was dust-covered, its winding key slightly rusted. She turned it carefully, and a soft melody began to play. The same melody Daniel had played for her the night of the rainstorm. Her breath caught. Inside the box was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. She opened it slowly. "My dearest Daniel, if you ever find this, I hope you've let love into your life again. And if the woman reading this is the one beside you, know that she was chosen for you before either of you could imagine it. Love her with all you have. Music will be your language, faith your anchor, and kindness your legacy." Rachel's hands trembled as she brought the letter to Daniel. He read it silently, then pulled her close. She knew. She always knew. That evening, they placed the music box on the piano. Daniel played along with its delicate chimes while Rachel hummed softly. Grace and Caleb curled up on the couch, drifting to sleep to the sound of music and the warmth of voices that promised they were safe. As Rachel watched Daniel's hands on the keys, she realized that their life together wasn't just about the love they shared. It was about the echoes they would leave behind. Somewhere, in a place beyond sight, she liked to believe Margaret was listening and smiling.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and leave a kind comment. To help the channel stay motivated to create more great videos, please hit the subscribe button. Wishing you happiness and peace in the light and love of God.